because we want to have some interactive time here. We've got a number of individuals that are going to share some information, get you thinking and talking about the work that we're doing, and we're continuing down this path of learning and leading together. All right, you have access to this, and I know you can't see it up there probably, so it would be a good idea if you can access it either through the Google Classroom or the agenda. And I want to make note of a few things. So we've received some feedback from all of you just about, hey, what's the picture of the future look like? Where are we headed? How do I define it? How do I share it with other people? And I would say to you, as much as we as a cabinet group would like to be perfect in the work we do, we are not. And as you're learning, we are learning as well. And this particular document is a result of our learning. To be able to give a clearer direction, a clearer focus of the work that stands before us. And I want to tell you, just outline a little bit on what appears in this document. This is a one-page document that talks about our PLC journey. And you'll see it's got the 3 big ideas. It has the outcomes of our journey. And the arrows with the boxes are the questions. If you take a look at the first box, notice it talks about standards. That's question number 1. The second box with the gray arrow is question number 2. It talks about assessments and understanding the dynamics of how to use assessments and what's the purpose of the assessment that we're either creating or implementing. The yellow arrow, or the third box, really is the third and fourth questions of our PLC journey. It is, what do we need to do if they didn't learn it? And what do we need to do if they have learned whatever that standard is that we're teaching? So question 3 and 4 are embedded in the third box. And the fourth box is this notion that if we do the first 3 boxes, we are up and running, and we are running full speed to make great things happen for our kids. Now, one of the first things you may ask or question is that, well, you know, Pete, I feel like our school's a little bit further along this continuum. And we know that that's going to happen, that people will be further down the road, maybe exploring different things with assessments, or maybe they're further down the road with standards work with their teachers, and that's okay. This is the minimum standard and expectation for implementation. But we're not going to stand in your way of doing good work moving forward. So here's how you read these arrows. Notice that we purposefully wrote in, here's the first box, school leaders will learn the standards. Put whatever word you want in there, become proficient, learn, become comfortable, experts in. The idea is that you're learning the standards. And that is taking place all of this year with the work that we're doing. Then below it says, and then you will lead your collaborative teams in gaining proficiency in the grade level academic standards and plan for instruction. We anticipate that that happens after you become experts in the standards. That starting in the summertime, moving into all of next year, you're now really drilling down in the standards, making sure your teams are working collaboratively with one another, and that instruction mirrors your knowledge of the content standards at each grade level. All right? That is the first question. Notice it carries over this year and next year. You are learning, and then you're leading. Now the gray box. Notice that the gray box spans 2 years as well. And it says school leaders will learn about the types and purposes of assessment. So think about what's going to be happening next year or starting in the summertime in preparation for next year. You're going to be leading the work in planning for instruction and helping your teachers really become experts in their content standards. You're going to be leading that work. Then at the same time, you're going to be learning more about assessment, more about the types, what their intentions are, and how to create, how to develop, and how to implement good learning assessment tools. Then, in 2020-21, you're then leading that work. You get a sense of what we're doing? We're learning and leading and learning and leading and learning and leading until we've done all the learning and leading our hearts can possibly take. All right? And it overlaps. When you're learning, when you're leading one component, you're learning the next one. When you're leading the next one, you're learning the following one. We hope that this gives you a little bit better understanding of the direction we're going. We've clarified our work. And I'm sorry that if we put you in a position where you've had to say to people, not quite sure what we're doing yet. That's not fair to you and to the people that you lead. We're hopeful that this will get you to a better place. Okay? And you can share this with people, use it how you'll feel that you need to. That's our plan. Questions on our plan? All right, we got a lot of work to do today. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy and take it away. You want this?
Sure. No, because I'm really short.
Okay.
Oh, it's going. Thank you. He's not only retiring, he's magic. All right. Thank you, Pete. As Pete was talking about this journey that we're on around professional learning communities, I'm so glad that we've got some clarity. And I also want to highlight 3 words that Pete talked about. He talked about leading, he talked about learning, and he talked about collaborative teams. And when we think about collaborative teams, and you think about where we are within that 5-year journey on becoming a professional learning community, it's really important that we understand and emphasize another thing that Pete said, is that people are in different places. And so we know in terms of professional learning that we're going to need to pay very close attention to that so that we can differentiate. I just want to call your attention again within the Learning by Doing books. These continuums that you have been working on really help to guide that work to say, where do you think that you are? Going back to that, revisiting, having conversations around where are we now? Maybe we're not where we thought that we were. And the other thing is to be thinking about, you're going to continue to hear about collaborative teams, and we're going to keep pushing that idea that the work that we're asking of teachers and of leaders on behalf of our kids is really difficult. And working in isolation as teachers is really difficult. So if we can move our thinking around those collaborative teams, not only as teachers, but as leaders, as you're sitting around your tables, we will be able to enrich our conversations. I had the pleasure of visiting some personalized learning schools in Marysville, Ohio last week. And one of the things that a principal said was, we had to get over this hump. We had to get over the hump of the uncomfortable collaborative structures. Think about that for a minute. Uncomfortable collaborative structures. Many of us are working in what we think are collaborative teams. We're working with like-minded people, or we share something. We share a grade level, we share a content, we share the same type of supervision, but really digging deep around that collaborative team effort. So what our hope is today, I'm going to talk you through the rest of our agenda for our time together. You will be working in different configurations. Some of it will be by yourself, some with a partner, and some as a collaborative team, and it's really intentional. So we are going to take a look at our district-wide benchmark data because we are focused on that question number 1. What is it we want our kids to know? So when you ask across Mesa Public Schools, what do our kids know in English language arts by grade level, in mathematics by grade level, from a district perspective, we have one tool called a benchmark. That's one way that we can get a snapshot of what our kids know at a point in time. So we're going to talk through that. Then we're going to go into your school level data and your benchmark, because we're going to take that district-wide approach of what do we want our kids to know down to the school level. And again, knowing that many of you as leaders have already dug into this, you know it forwards and backwards, you've met with your grade level teams, you've had great discussions. And then there's some of you that are saying, you know, we're really working towards that type of a structure at our school. So I'm going to remind you of one of the quotes or pieces of information that Pete shared earlier around standing in the gap and then supporting others. So I'm hopeful that those of you who have a whole lot of experience with this are able to support the people next to you, and those of you that are learning are able to ask really great questions and walk away a little bit stronger and deepening your knowledge today, wherever you are on this learning journey. So after we look at your school level data, then we're going to take a look back into our standards documents. So what does that mean? In October, we talked a lot about the ELA and the math standards, and that was just our beginning. So now we're going to go into those documents, and we're going to take a look and match those up to our benchmarks. Because again, our benchmark data that we're sharing with you is through the lens of what is it we want our kids to know. So that takes us back into our curriculum documents and our implementation guides. And then we will wrap up with what is coming your way between now and January. So I am very excited to be able to introduce Dave McNeil and Amy Uchaz. If you've not yet had an opportunity to work directly with them, it is a treat, because they come from the lens of teacher, they come from the lens of administrator, but mostly as champions for kids. So Dave, all you.
Yay, thank you, Andy. Andy did an awesome job of setting the stage for us. As we're looking back to Pete's trajectory, it's hard to figure out where are we along the journey that Dr. Conley's put in place. So we're going to ask you to kind of walk along the swimming pool and kind of dip your toe in the water every now and then we're going to stay focused on learning and what do we want our kids to know. But we're not going to get into the results quite yet. We don't want to focus on the results. And you're saying, Dave, how are you saying that? And this slide says AZ Merit / benchmark data. Yes, we're going to kind of dip our toe in the pool a little bit, using the data to bring us back to what we want our kids to learn. So I'm going to ask you, give me a thumbs up if we can stay focused on learning and what do we want our kids to know. Give me a thumbs up if we can just put that in our brain through all the work that we do today as we're using data. Thank you so much. Just to put a bow on the AZ Merit story, it's over, right? AZ Merit is over. Letter grades are over. Raise your hand if you talked with your staff about AZ Merit results. We learned a lot, right? How many of you came up with strategies or things that you need to focus on by looking at those results? Raise your hand if you have a strategy. Does anybody want to share? And I have excellent wait time because I've been at many schools talking with staffs. Does anybody have a strategy or something from the results, as we're going to put AZ Merit and letter grades to bed here in 1 minute? I just want to hear a principal raise their hand and say, you know what, Dave? This is what we saw from the results, and this is what we're going to do. Anybody want to share? Yeah.
So I hope that I'm not alone in noticing that our third grade ELA, one of the big gaps we see is that students are introduced to high-stakes testing for the first time.
You're good.
That they tend to struggle with comprehension questions. So we are looking into curricular resources that can introduce students to comprehension strategies and comprehension before they've achieved a level of fluency where they can be reading to learn when they're still learning to read, but sort of concurrently developing their ability to comprehend, to understand the text. So we're looking for curricular resources related to that for first and second grade, so it's not as heavy of a lift for our third grade teachers.
Perfect. Let's give them a round of applause. Nice job. And I like how we went from the results back to the focus on learning. Yeah, share. It was great. We'll do another one. Give me yes.
Okay. So in the beginning of the year, we looked at our ELA results and we realized that our students are not achieving those higher order thinking skills. So we have a team of teachers that took their Red for Ed passion and put it towards changing our campus, and every PLC is working on how to analyze within their content, not necessarily ELA, but pushing those higher order thinking. And every PLC has created SMART goals aligned with that. So we're excited to see that needle move.
Let's give a round of applause. Nice job, Tamara. Nice job. So as I got the opportunity to get to some of the sites and some of the staff's meetings, I know I was at Lowell on, gosh, I don't even know what day that was, Chuck. Was that Wednesday? Talking with the staff about, okay, these are the results, and what does it mean, and how are we doing? I always like to compare the AZ Merit and high stakes accountability it's the only show in town, and we have tickets, unfortunately, and we have to go to the show. The uncertainty of the future of AZ Merit and high stakes testing will be shaken out this spring. So as building leaders, we know no 2 days are created equally or the same, so just hold on and know that there will be something out there that somebody will judge us on, right? I look at the AZ Merit and benchmark data, and I start thinking, oh my gosh, how do we transition from one to the other? And the answer is, we better, right? The AZ Merit is post-mortem, and the benchmark data is alive and well, and we finished benchmark 1, and we're getting ready to move on to benchmark 2. So let's stay big focus here. Let's look at how did our district do across in line with our 3rd grade reading, or ELA, 8th grade math, 11th grade ELA. How did we do? Well, this is district-wide data. I see a lot of blue lines, I see a lot of numbers, and I see some things at the bottom that I probably don't know exactly what they are. But as a district team and our cabinet, we will be having conversations about what does this mean to us? What does this mean to you as the building leader? How do you as the building leader play with respect to this? How did you do? Did you do better? Do you have some things to work on? What is this? These are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. I believe that this has something to do with historical series of events. Amy, am I right?
That is correct.
Okay. So what does that mean? Well, I'm looking at the highest one at 67.7. This is how the district shook out in 3rd grade reading. How did my school do versus this? So it's important as building leaders that we look at our AZ Merit results and we compare to our like schools, but at the same time, the benchmark data can tell the same story as the AZ Merit. And actually, I would say it should tell a better story. So, how are we doing with these things? That is the question we need to be asking ourselves. Let's move to 8th grade math. Wow, what do we see? Whatever these numbers are, I'm going to bet that this standard here has something to do with linear equations. Amy, am I right?
That is right.
So I don't know. How is my campus, our junior highs, how are we doing with linear equations? Do my 7th and 8th grade teachers, or my 7th and my 8th grade teachers feed into my 8th grade? How are they doing with this? Is it one of our focuses? Do we need to focus on that? Are we having these conversations in our collaborative teams about being strategic? Do we know what we need to teach to get the best results? From the accountability lens, to play the game and get the high letter grade, yes, that's important. But at the same time, remember, the most important thing is providing a viable and equitable curriculum for our kiddos and providing a quality education. Bottom line. That is more important than any letter grade, and don't let any politician tell you otherwise, okay? 11th grade reading, as we can see, we have some highs, we have some lows. Again, I'm going to guess, I'm not so savvy on my 11th grade standards, but I'm going to say something to do with point of view, narratives.
Yes, a variety of genres and narratives in the point of view.
What else, Amy? Anything else on that?
We were also looking at reading for literature and analyzing the impact of the author's choice and how they develop context within what they are reading.
Okay. So again, remember, these are the standards that our teachers should be teaching, and it is our responsibility as building leaders to ensure that this is teaching that is occurring on our campus. And this is part of the story. How did your school do in comparison to the district level data? So benchmarks aren't just for district office, they are for building leaders as well. You are part of that story. If it is not part of the story, I would give you a little nudge or a little motivation to say it needs to become part of the story. With the uncertainty of the AZ merit, which we know the contract is up at the end of the year, and the idea and the spirit of autonomy and site control in our legislature, I'm going to bet that a menu of assessments will be probably on our doorstep for our K-8 friends. Our high school friends are already part of the gig when we are talking about graduation rate, when we're talking about CCRI. I know our building principals are savvy with respect to CCRI and the menu and looking at those opportunities. So our K-8 friends, I'm going to give you a little heads up. I'm going to bet that our assessment tool will be our high stakes testing and our accountability measure. So just letting you know, if you are that principal that devalues benchmarks or says that it's not a line, I would advise you to stop. Because this possibly could be the motivation for your teachers as we move forward. So, I know that we have nobody like that in the rooms, and we all champion benchmarks because every district across the valley loves either ATI, Illuminate, or School City. Raise your hand if you love those vendors and all those benchmark things. Come on, raise your hands. Raise your hands. I know, it's hard. It's hard. But I'm going to advise you to maybe learn a little bit more about the benchmarks and move forward because this will be our compass as we move forward, I would bet. Common definitions and understandings.
All right, so just as we've been refreshing with our PLC work and really kind of norming the process, if you will, and making sure that we're all grounded in what the common definitions are for our vision and our mission and for our collective commitments, we want to make sure that we have that common definition and common purpose as well for why we benchmark. Because again, this is all connected back to the work of our collaborative teams and how our collaborative teams have a process and a skill set to go back and look at the standards. And if our processes are a little bit different from site to site, that impacts the work of our collaborative teams. So to get you started today and really refreshing what is our purpose and our why for benchmarking, we're going to engage in a quick protocol called a chalk talk or a graffiti write. In this protocol here in a second, I am going to have you take chart paper that's on the floor next to you. And at your tables, you will silently write down the purpose and the why for why we benchmark. Again, it's not a talking activity. You'll take a marker and you're going to just write out your understandings, your thoughts for the purpose and the why of the benchmark. I'm going to give you about a minute to get your tables cleared off, to get your chart paper and markers, and then I'll give you the signal of go to get your tables started.
I would envision that you will be standing and writing. It'll be too difficult to sit and write, so get the paper situated. Everybody grab a pen. You're doing great. You're doing great. Casey's got finger paints. Casey? Casey's finger painting
All
over
right,
here.
don't get started yet. Make
Whoa,
sure
whoa,
your
whoa.
paper's out. We're not going to get started writing quite yet. Just make sure you're at your seats. I'll give you the go. This is when I love being short and I need a ladder for rooms this large. Looks like some of us are standing. That's great. You can stand in, lean in, sit down, lean across.
Amy, one more time. What are we writing on this chart paper?
We are going to be writing silently, individually, so you're all going to pick a corner or the center or somewhere for you to write down your thoughts, the purpose for benchmarking. Why do we do it? You can have multiple thoughts, not just one sentence and done. All right, you've got about 3 minutes. We will walk around the room and monitor how you guys are doing, but about 3 minutes, no talking.
Ready, go. All right, we're ready for our next instructions. So I'm going to ask that everybody stand up. But before we give you your instructions, Dr. Conley wants to make an introduction.
So you may have noticed that there is a man that you may not have met in our midst, and he's with the Westwood Five, this table over here. Mike Schmoker is with us today. So Mike Schmoker is an international author, his recent book, Focus, and he is here. He's an Arizona resident, and he is here to watch our learning, be part of our learning, and hopefully continue to be part of our learning. So welcome to Mesa Public Schools.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for being here, Mike. Amy?
All right, so your next task is you will move kind of counterclockwise if you can in 1 second. And what you are going to do is when you get to your next table, you will have an opportunity to talk now. And you will look at what the other table has written down, and you can bring your markers. And what I'd like for you to do is to star something maybe that you agree with. You can write, tell me more about this. You can perhaps underline something that sticks out or resonates with you, but your table will move, have an opportunity to look at their chart, talk about it, circle, underline, write your thoughts. And you may also bring a Post-it or something to write down something that you see on their chart that really resonates with you, so you can take that back to your table with you. In the best and easiest way possible, go ahead and try to move counterclockwise to that table.
Stay together with your
Stay
team.
together with your group.
Just go
and
here.
move
Go over
on
here.
to the next table.
Stay together as a table. Stay together as a table. I'm sorry. No.
We will give you about 2 minutes at that table. You may talk.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Check out the new table's writing. You have a pen in your hand. Smiley faces, stars, question marks, no sad faces.
Yep, we are ready to move. You are going to move to another table.
Find a new
Stick with your
table.
group.
Stay together as a group.
Stay together, pick a new table. I encourage you, if you haven't, write down some thoughts, ask some questions, push each other's thinking. This is a safe place to dig deeper into our why.
How about one more?
All right, we're going to rotate one more time.
One more time.
One more table.
Find a new table. All right, at this time, let's find our ways back to our original table. Find your
And-
way back to your table.
As you get to your table, just take a second to look at anything that's been written on your chart. So as you get back to your table again, just take a moment to take a look what's been added to your chart at your table.
All right. Since you've been gone, people have been writing on your poster. What did they write? What do you notice? The million-dollar question. What did we notice? What did we see? What did we experience when we came back to our table or along our journey? What were some ahas, or what was something we noticed? Anybody want to share out? I have incredible wait time. What did we notice? Russ said, opportunities to celebrate. Can you explain a bit more, Russ? Can you elaborate on that?
It was on a couple down here. I think we're using the data to help to relearn, but also to help those kids that got it. I think it take time. Are you on pace? Let the kids know that you're feeling good about their progress.
Yeah, I think it's important. Benchmarks are an opportunity to celebrate what our kids know, not what our kids don't know. I know that it's important to decipher the difference, but I would encourage all teachers or all leaders to focus on the good things and celebrate those moving forward. Anybody else want to share out? Oh, Justine, thank you.
There was a lot of common understanding, so validation of our thoughts about why we do assessments and how it can help inform our practice on our campus.
Like Justine said, there was some commonalities, obviously. As we were walking from table to table, it almost seemed like we all were saying the same thing. That is a celebration. That is validating to us that we understand why we benchmark. The number one reason we benchmark, I would say, from my lens, is to inform instruction and to shape what our instruction looks like. It's important that we keep that in our forefront as we move forward along this. Mr. Schmoker.
Along those lines, Dave, I wonder if, again, there's probably a fairly common perception that we give these tests, we look at the results, and then the specific results we get, like the high scoring areas as opposed to the middle and low scoring areas, they guide the next strategies that we will employ to make the scores higher. Is there anyone in this room is a little skeptical of that approach with English language arts? So it's a question, I'll just let it hang.
I think that is a fair question. With respect to English ELA, it is more difficult. And we've had these conversations before. As our benchmarks are created through our content specialists, I think we all can agree that the math is more linear. Would you agree, Don? And what are our struggles with the ELA?
One of our struggles is when we dug deeply into those standards last time, remember we talked about the fact that they aren't artificially broken. So when you're looking in that assessment bank for choosing how are we going to assess it, they're assessing the standard as a whole. So when when our content specialists are working with teams of specialists and teachers to find those assessment items, they're looking for the best item for that time. So I think there's an awful lot of challenge when we're looking at trying to assess English language arts only with the items that are in the item bank as it being one of our data points and pieces, but it's challenging in how they're organized in the item bank.
I would agree. And with our movement to AZ Merit, I know our complaints coming from Ames to AZ Merit is we don't get that individual information about the strands with respect to the AZ Merit versus the Ames. Mike?
Well, Crystal was going to say something.
I like that. Crystal.
As part of the work that our 5 are doing, it's a collaborative effort, and what we really looked at was, do teachers really truly understand the standards? And what we are, I want to say we are leading our teachers, but they are guiding their own learning and really analyzing the standards and then understanding that when you look at, we started with RL3, when you look at that standard, there's other standards that tie into that. And what teachers are starting to organically discover, which has a much deeper meaning than just our content specialists, because I was one of those content specialists that handed it over to them. What they are really starting to understand is that you really can't provide a scope and sequence for ELA. It's all married together, it's all blended together, and they're getting that learning this year, and it's been very, very powerful. So.
In a big way, just double the amount of reading kids do, period. More nonfiction, at least double, fiction and nonfiction with some kind of higher order question to guide the discussion and the writing about it. Then all that stuff goes up. Point of view goes up, inferencing goes up, all the good stuff goes up.
Yay, nice job. Oh, one more, yeah, let's keep sharing, nice job.
You know, I just wanted to say that this work is important, I think, because, I saw some comments that we're teaching to the test, or this is all about getting ready for the test. And in my view, it's the polar opposite of that. So if we really understand the standards and are teaching the standards well, then students will be prepared for the test. And taking the benchmark also prepares kids, and Tammy mentioned in hers, to address the technology and not be fearful of the technology so that doesn't get in the way. So there's huge value in doing this work that goes way beyond preparing for AZ Merit.
Nicely said. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Remember, we're walking along the swimming pool. We're dipping our toe in the results, but we're still focusing on what do we want our students to learn? I was going to say kiddos. What do we want our kiddos to learn? And focus on learning, but we have some information that will get us there. So I would agree, it should be about the learning, not about the test. The test will take care of itself. Amy?
And that's a really great transition into getting at kind of our practices, if you will, those protocols, and the way that we ensure, again, that our collaborative teams on our campuses are administering benchmarks in a way that allows us to have the best and cleanest data in order for us to sit in a collaborative team and have consistent conversations. We need to make sure that some practices and protocols are in place so that our data isn't not demonstrating the validity and the reliability and the efficacy that we need it to, because perhaps we're all administering it a little bit differently. And so again, we want to make sure that those consistent practices are in place. So what we have in front of you is a MPS refresh on the benchmark practices. And in a moment, what we'll do is we're going to take a minute to read over that. You also have an article on your table, or it is linked. And in 1 second, you're going to be able to take the district benchmark practices and the article, and I'm going to let you know what pages connect to that. And you'll have a minute to just read over those and underline some things that are sticking out or resonating. Again, this is about how do we create those conditions for learning in our classrooms and on our campus to support the work of digging deep into the standards, making those connections to the work back with our collaborative teams to get at instruction for our students. What do they need to know and be able to do? So in that Learning Forward article on pages 9 through 15, it gets into those conditions for the climate and culture and the work of our collaborative teams to support this work, again, in relationships to standards and those leadership capacities which create this environment on our campus. So you can read through pages 9 through 15. You're going to underline what resonates with you, and then look over the MPS benchmark refresh and underline what resonates with you in that article.
So Amy, we have a little quiet learning time, I'm guessing, at our tables. So we all should have the white article as well as the green sheet. We're going to give you how long, Amy?
And the article is also linked in the Google Classroom, and we're going to take about 5 to 8 minutes, kind of looking at time, about 8 minutes for you to read over that article and over the MPS benchmark refresh document, underlining what's sticking out with you, what resonates with you. And that article, again, is in the Google Classroom as well. Pages 9 through 15.
Amy?
As you're starting to wrap up your underlining and your highlighting, again, as we're refreshing some of this information, we want to remind that we know and we recognize that for most of you, this information is not new learning, and that in very different places throughout of our schools, some of us have this work that is taking place, and others, again, are still developing some of those protocols and practices. And so in a minute here, we're going to do some sharing. And again, it's an opportunity for us to differentiate our conversations and our learning, and to share out those best practices that we already have in place, and those practices that as leaders, we're really wanting to refine and refresh on our campus. And so what we'd like for you to do next is there is an index card on your table, and this protocol is just called the most important point. And what I'd like for you to do is to kind of make a connection between the article that you read and the refresh document, and just write down what is the very most important point for you, what really stuck out or resonated with you. You're going to write that most important point down on the note card. I'm going to give you about a minute or so to do that, and then you're going to have an opportunity here in a second to do some sharing. So write down that MIP on your note card, and we'll have an opportunity to do some sharing.
MIP, most important point, and then you're going to get up and share in a moment. So make sure you sound really smart. That'll be easier for some of us than others. What's your MIP from this? Write it down.
As you are finishing up writing, I'm going to go ahead and give you your next steps. We'll give you that signal for go just because it's such a large group. But in a minute here, you're going to find someone that perhaps you haven't talked to yet today, so definitely not someone at your table. And you are going to have an opportunity to share that most important point with that person. So just about here in the next 10 seconds, I see lots of people madly writing down their final thoughts. We're going to have you get up, find someone that you haven't talked with yet today, and share that most important point. If you'd like, bring your pen with you. Perhaps you're going to capture a thought or an idea that you're going to want to bring back to your campus, have a conversation with your collaborative teams about, so you might want to jot down some notes as the two of you are sharing. Try to stay in pairs, if necessary, groups of 3 at the most.
Ready? Stand
Go.
up. Go. Find somebody. Find somebody. Share your MIP.
Do you want me to have it rotate again?
I will.
All right, go ahead and thank the people that you spoke with. We are going to have you share one more time. So find another person to share your most important point with.
Okay.
Or stay right where you're at.
All right. 3, 2,
I feel like I'm not moving.
2, 1. Nice job, everybody. All right. Thank the person that you just shared with. Find somebody new. Let's find somebody new. Shift. Find somebody new. Somebody just as fabulous. 1. Okay. Tell your partner you're the best. Tell your partner you're the best. Tell your partner you're the best. Have a seat. What's that?
Did you want us to be done?
That's good conversation. All right. Well, Amy and I hope you told your partner they were the best. Nice job. Nice job. Now that we had an opportunity to read a little bit, write a little bit, listen and speak a little bit, what do we know? What did we learn from walking around the room and talking to each other? I want a dollar bill for somebody that will share out. Share out. What'd they hear? Nice, thank you.
Really just talked about one line that sunk in. Principals hold at bay competing initiatives in order to focus the greatest intention and effort of student achievement of the new standards. So we really, as principals, we can't do it alone, but we have to hold in all these different initiatives and directions and then put them into play when they're appropriately. But if we try to put them all into play immediately, you lose culture, you lose staff, you lose all those things. So just please know to put them in at appropriate times.
Let's give Aaron a round of applause. Nice job. Great job. You guys, nice job. Huh?
$1.
I'll get it when I get over to my wallet. My wallet's over there. Yeah, I'll bring it right over. As soon as we give it to Andy, I'm going to give you $1. Oh, there's $1 right there. I'll give it to Brian here in a minute. Hey, another $1 for someone that shares out. Oh, Brian. I owe you $2.
I think the collective summary of the two conversations where we have to build those collaborative groups and focus on learning, but then we also have those principals get out and support instruction, but we first have to know instruction to be able to support it effectively. And not only getting out to support those in need, but getting out to see them all, so as we create needs, we're creating needs for all, not just those who need support.
Let's give Brian a round of applause. Nice job. You got to know, right? You got to know this stuff. And once you know this stuff, you need to model it. Remember, you guys are instructional leaders, period. If I asked you who's an instructional leader in here, raise your hand. Everybody raise your hand. You guys are instructional leaders. This is the work that we do. It is important that you are the driver. It stops and starts with you. If you have a Title I coordinator on your campus, great. You are the driver. If you have a part-time team leader, is that what we call it here? You are the driver. Remember that. The buck stops with you. You are the chief learning officer on your campus, period. So, as we move forward along this journey about what do we want our kids to know and our focus on learning, it starts and ends with you. I remember 2005 at Washington Elementary School along I-17, showing up to a campus that did not have a culture of learning, focus on learning. And we had district created benchmarks at the time, and the staff went from 3 principals in 5 years, and the demographics changed from Caucasian to Latino and poverty and all those things. And there were all these things that got in the way. And the first thing that I remember in 2006, after I watched for a year, crazily, we needed to focus on learning. And we needed to get back to the standards. And we needed to look at our information that told us, were we doing those things? So I would urge you or motivate you or push you or slap you, whatever the adjective is, to ask yourself, are we focused on learning on our building? And what is your responsibility to that? So just want to leave that with you. So in the big picture, now that we have had Pete kind of give us our 5-year trajectory, we know we're working on our collaborative teams and our PLC refresh, if that's the term that we're using, and we're focused on learning. We're going to now dig into some of the stuff that we asked you to bring and get a little more micro with respect to what do we want our kids to know. So without further ado, first of all, give yourselves a round of applause for that portion. Nice job. And then we'll shift on over to Dr. Forlis.
Thank you, Dave. All right, so you brought a bunch of stuff with you today. You brought your school level benchmark data. So we're going to have a moment to jump in to that data, and we've got a couple of things that you're going to have in front of you. So you have your school level data. You also have, each of you, a gold placemat. And this is a protocol that we're going to use to walk you through the analysis of your school level data. And then I'd also like to recall your attention to the lime green sheet in the middle of your table that is titled the MPS Benchmark Refresh. It's also linked within your agenda. So as Dr. McNeil mentioned, Amy did a really nice job leading us through the why, that chalk talk of why do we benchmark. We have the lime green sheet that talks about how do we benchmark. So what does that look like in Mesa Public Schools? Part of the how is what grade levels do we test? How often do we test? Why do we test? How do we get the information? What's the role of the principal in benchmarking? What's the role of the teacher? What's the role of the student? So you've got all of this in front of you. So now I'm going to draw your attention to this goldenrod large placemat. And you're going to have an opportunity for 10 minutes when I say go to begin to individually reflect and jot some ideas down related to these questions that emerge when you look at your school level benchmark data. So things like, what questions should you address next? And what questions arise from analyzing? What do you want to do some further study about? What are your wonderings? Taking a look at what are the positives, what are the negatives? What surprises did you find out within your data? And what do you now know that you didn't know prior to spending time doing this particular analysis? And again, I want to honor those of you in the room knowing that we are on a very differentiated path about the level of understanding and the level of usage of benchmark data. So those of you who spent a lot of time, you might have even spent over fall break digging into this information. You might have spent all weekend looking at this information. Please know how much we value what you do and how you do it. And most importantly, those of you that have high levels of confidence with this, please feel free to support those around you that might just be learning. We've got directors in the room that are not intimate with this data every single day. We've got content specialists in the room to help us in just a bit. And so we have a wide variety of learners. So I really appreciate, again, standing in that gap to support one another as we need it. So I'm going to be quiet. You've got your benchmark data in front of you, and I'm going to start the buzzer now because I'm saying go. Take 10 minutes, jot down some of your initial reactions to the questions on this placemat, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk. I'd like you to, many of you have started having conversations. I invite you to really share and compare what you're learning. All right, if I can bring everybody back to the whole group from the listening to the crest of the wave of conversation, it sounds like we might be at a really good spot to come back together and have a conversation around what I would like for you to think about. Many of you have detailed notes on your placemat. Some of you are typing electronically. Lots of great conversations were being had around, this is that standard where they have to compare literature with nonfiction. This is the standard that they need to do this. This is the standard they need to do that. Remember that we're taking a look at our benchmarks, answering that first question, that focus on learning. What is it that we want our kids to learn? So it's really exciting to be able to hear some curricular conversations. So when we think about what's in front of you, as you look at that placemat and think about the questions that you had, what are some of the ahas that you would like to share with the whole group? Something that came up. What said, oh my gosh, didn't think about that. Maybe it affirmed what you already knew. Maybe it's a question that's lingering for you. Maybe it's something you disagree with.
Andy has really good wait time too.
Thank you, Gina.
So one of the things I was most surprised at, and then Mark helped talk me through this, is why my most accelerated math group of kids, honors geometry, would be doing so poorly and not meeting the expectations. And clearly they passed Algebra 1, so they know the material, they're where they should be. And I've never experienced this before. Same teacher, nothing different, what's happening. And so Mark had some great feedback and intervention and really kind of reset my mind, and that was treat them the way you would treat an intervention group who's not doing well and not me, because I've never had that with honors before. And so that was really helpful to think about that. But it was surprising that my most accelerated group is doing as poorly as they are.
Interesting to think about the power of mindset, right? And the power of motivation and where kids are connected or not connected to the content, and how we have to keep instilling the conversations around mindset, whether it's that abundance mindset that we talked about earlier, or a deficit mindset, and how we think differently. Another aha, something that came up. Something you want to learn more about. What do you think, Russ? I'll give you the microphone.
Thank you. I noticed, at least for my school, my kids didn't do well on 2 specific questions. And I'm a big fan, part of it's the format of the test. And in both questions, 20 and 24 on 3rd grade reading, it's a 2-part question. And if they don't get to practice that, and you don't get credit, if you miss one of them, you don't get credit for the other. So when you look at those questions, and they were in informational text.
Nice job, Russ.
Excellent. Digging down, taking a look at how the benchmarks dig right back down into the standards, and then even a little bit more sophistication, looking at the types of questions. What else?
Well, at our table, looking at 3rd grade reading, it was the same. It's those same 2 questions where the students are achieving low, and we're pulling them out and looking at it. And what I'm looking at, and my questions for my 3rd grade team are, are we living too closely to Harcourt still? The stories are great, but the questioning is not adequate. And so are we either taking the Harcourt stories and enriching the questioning to be appropriate for this level of expectation, or are we still kind of living by that old standard? Because what I'm seeing here are passages that are not necessarily all that complex, but I see questions that are very complex. Now, they are 2-part questions, and the kids don't get enough practice, but are they... again, the level of the questioning is much more intense than in Harcourt, so I need to have that conversation with them.
Nice job.
Thank you, Scott. And that makes me think a lot about as we're going to transition to this conversation around standards, curriculum, and instruction. When we spent time together in October digging into the ELA and the math standards, there was quite a bit of intention in that professional learning around the differences between standards, instruction, and curriculum. And what Scott talks about is we're taking a look at our curriculum, what we're using to teach the standards, and in Mesa Public Schools in grades K through 6 for ELA, we have Harcourt. So how do we take that content in Harcourt and then ratchet up that level of thinking and expectation that we need to have our kids so that they can meet the demands of rigorous standards? So great conversation, and I know that that was a part of the training that the elementary principals had, so I really appreciate that feedback. Anybody from high school, an aha, a wondering, something you want to know more about, something you want to question?
Nice job, Andy, not letting the high school friends off the hook.
Well, we did a little elementary, got to have a little love for the junior high. How about our high school folks? Questions? Wonderings? What are you going to go back and think about? Who are you going to have conversations with? And about what? What are you thinking? Proximity helps too. I've never known you to be quiet, Jared.
I'm just studying the question. All right, so I think that we're really going to have to get to, I'm just sitting here looking at a multiple part question, 3 required answers. It's obviously the lowest one district-wide, lowest one for us as a campus. So obviously the question is, are we doing enough of this, just as was stated earlier, in our classes on a regular basis? And then also, how aware are our faculty members that this is what students are walking into? And so I think it's probably at each PLC level, not only the leads, but the entire group, getting together and reviewing and having those discussions and creating together some intermittent ways of assessing in similar fashions to prepare our students.
And I think it would be interesting, Jared, perfect. How do we have that conversation with our collaborative teams without making it about the test? I think we could pitch it as our kids answering questions in multiple ways, blah, 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 to try to keep it away from it about being the test. Greg?
At our last late start, we provided our teachers with collaborative time in a breakout sessions where they could choose what areas they felt they needed to best help them with the reading portion to improve scores. And I think we need to do more of that. I think we need to give teachers the time and the opportunity to ask us what they need for training to help improve their scores.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Greg. And I want to piggyback on a conversation I had with Mike from Poston Junior High, talking about when we shared our most important point that we were going to take away. His point and my point mirrored one another-ish, and then we put it together. In that I think about the work of leaders, and as I continue to think about and read about and study the work of leaders, leaders do their work through other people. And so when you really think about that, we do our work through other people. So who are those other people? Who? And we keep mentioning collaborative teams. We mention team leaders. We mention department leaders. And in our conversation that Mike and I were having, he says, you know what? I'm not quite sure that I've trained my collaborative team leaders to be leaders. And to be leaders of what? And to do what? And to not do what? And so I think that that is one of the things that we continue to have conversation around when we're looking at if data is the thing that prompts the question, we ask ourselves, do we really understand what all of this means and what the role of a teacher leader is? So I see that as an area that we need to differentiate some of our professional learning for administrators to say, if that is something that you're interested in pursuing, we definitely need to respond to that. And I know that we've had some individual principals reach out to Tracy Eastlis in the professional development department saying, can you help us with that? We're all in. We want to be able to help with any of those ideas and most importantly, learn alongside of you. So let's get back to this work of curriculum and standards and instruction. So going back in our October training, we talked again, I'll just kind of reframe it again, that we talked about the differences between standards, curriculum, and instruction. So to jot our memories, Here's just a quick graphic to help us center ourselves again around standards. Standards is why we're teaching what we're teaching. Why are we doing this? Why is the teacher teaching that particular standard? Why is it important for kids to learn it? That's our why. Then we move into curriculum. We're talking about what. So what is it that we're using for kids to be able to access those standards at high levels? And then we talk about the how, and that's where we talk about instruction. So those instructional strategies that teachers use, we have AVID schools, we have PBIS schools, we have IB schools, we have schools that are very committed to the College Board and the work of advanced placement. We have schools that are committed to dual language immersion. We have STEM schools, we have inquiry-based schools, we have literacy-rich schools. So those are those instructional strategies that are near and dear to the identity of your school. So again, framing the standards is why we teach what we teach. The curriculum is what we teach, what we're using to get to those standards, and then those instructional strategies are how we want it into the hearts and minds of our kids. So keeping ourselves grounded in that, I am going to turn over to Dr. Dawn Foley and Dr. Sean Enright, our directors of curriculum in the world of English, language, arts, and math, as well as our content specialist, Alita Miller, who is our secondary content ELA specialist, and Angela Wells, secondary math, and we've got Jessica Veazey, our elementary ELA specialist. And we are all here to support the next segment as we move into standards and curriculum.
Okay, can I have your clicker? All right. Okay, so one of the things that we were really excited about when we had the opportunity last month to really work with you on our standards, to talk about the design of the standards, and our supporting resources, our documents. One of the things we're excited to talk with you about today is looking at the analysis, an item analysis tool, and using our curriculum documents to really get to the more important role that you have as instructional leaders on your campus, is helping get to the why and what do we do now with this information. Because going back to we talked a little bit today about the importance of what is the role of benchmarking. We also looked at the fact that benchmarking is one piece of information that we use to inform us in a balanced assessment framework. And so we're wanting to help highlight a couple really cool things. Some tools that we've got in School City that really will lead to more meaningful, very deep conversations with your collaborative teams. And some of these tools you may be very, very familiar with and have been utilizing an awful lot. And we're wanting to kind of go back into, because a couple of you said some amazing comments about, let's look at the item, let's look at the rationale. What does this say to me as the instructional leader about the conversations that I should be having? And we want to kind of walk through that together. So you have a couple things on your table. We're going to show you first, and then we're going to do it with you and together, and you can begin digging in at your teams with your tables to really get to this. So we've got, you either brought with you or we've put in front of you some copies of, or we will be putting in front of you copies of the curriculum, our curriculum implementation documents. You also brought some analysis, standard analysis, but we're going to show you too one of the tools in School City that is better to use live, because it allows you not to have to print, but to look for a little bit more information specifically. Because really what we want to be getting into are the deeper, more meaningful questions about what does this mean? This is where the art and the science come together and make magic, particularly when you're working with your collaborative teams, which are the ideas of, okay, is this aligned to the standards? One of the things you'll be looking at when you look at those items is you're going back to, what is the standard? What does the performance level descriptor say? What patterns does this tell you? And again, there's maybe only one or two questions, but these will lead to some really good questions with your teams, like, how are we teaching the standard? How do you know? What other information do you have? How will you continue to monitor? What does this mean? And again, what other instructional implications are there? So we'll show you real quick. Now, again, we also have in front of you the visuals for this, because you might have brought in an analysis, but we also wanted you to see how to get into the one that's easier to look at live versus printing, because it can go a little bit deeper. So we'll show first, and then we'll give you a second to go in there, either electronically or with what you brought today, to kind of think about these questions with the more important, so now what? So again, on our website, going into the school city using your Active Directory login under reports, and again, we've got these on your page in front of you if you haven't done it before or have it memorized. We have visuals on how to get there. But most importantly, you're going to be identifying which test you're looking at, and then you're going to get this screen. This screen, which looks like something you might have printed with you today. This is an overview of how they performed on those standards. But when you scroll down and you look at the very top where we circled that item analysis, this is where we can get more into the kind of conversation about so what. It gives you this lovely analysis, this item analysis, if you will, where, again, on this page, you've got this bar circled red. You look here real closely, you can see it identifies which standard and the percent correct. This is where you begin to start digging in why. You'll notice that if you were to hover over any one of those bars that you wanted to know a little bit more about, you would have three different information we've circled in red at the top. An item summary of how did the students respond overall? What was that item? And this is where you can begin to look back at that standard to see, was that a good item? Let's go a little deeper. And maybe the other part that we would look at is that rationale for why that miscue. Sometimes looking at why they made the mistake is really insightful for our instruction and the conversations with the teachers about how else are we teaching this? What other information do we have? So it allows us to get really deep beyond just the percent passing or the score. And again, it's a tool that many of you may be using, but this is one that's best to use live because it can begin to ask questions for you. So we'd love for you to take a second here with your team or by yourself. And again, we are here with you as support and we'll come and have conversation and dialogue with you as well. We want you to begin digging in for a second. With those frequently asked, and we had some people already looking at them, okay, they were maybe the two-part questions. Let's go back and look at what standard was that connected to? Was that a good item? What other information would we need to know? Or what other conversations would we be having with our teachers when we go a little bit deeper in that analysis? So we also want you to be looking at the standards document, looking at the performance level descriptors, because it may allude to how, more importantly, are we going to continue to assess and monitor this standard, and what information do you now want to be talking more specifically about with your collaborative teams? So take a second, and again, we have the guidance there for you, and we're here to help you. Go play for a second. Dig a little deeper.
So as I had the pleasure of walking around and listening to some of the conversations, it was really great to hear the language of standards, instruction, and curriculum, because those are so very different, but they all work so tightly together. And being able to get into the benchmark, analyze questions to really understand how much of that English language arts standard are we teaching each quarter? What does it look like? How is that guided by the work of our benchmarks? And then most importantly, this last question is thinking about, so from your learning today, what will you be taking back, and what questions, what conversations will you be having with your collaborative teams? Is there anybody that has a question, a wondering, an exclamation point, an aha that you would like to share? I don't want to move on without hearing from you if there's something that's lingering. Are we good? All right. We're getting there, guys. Okay. If we can click. It doesn't matter. All right. Well, we don't need the next slide anyway. So I want to talk a little bit about where we're going and what's coming. So we have this work that you did in July around building collaborative teams, the work you did with standards in October, and this particular work of digging into benchmarks is being shared with your department chairs at the secondary level, at the junior high and the high school level. It is being shared with Title I specialists, all of our specialists that we have throughout the district. And on either October 23rd or November 20th. So if you go back, and those of you that lead a Title I building, you go back and talk to your Title I specialist, they'll say, wait a minute, we haven't done the standards work yet. Well, they will be getting it. There was 2 different dates that they chose from, October 23rd or November 20th, so it is coming. We want to make sure that the learning is in front of principals before it goes to our teacher leaders, because we know how frustrating it is when you don't have the leading information. That's important for us to ensure. So what's coming your way? We will continue our work with standards the next time that we meet in January at our next general administrator meeting, and we will have another round of benchmarks to share. Benchmarks open November 26th, which is really important for everybody to know. We've got that green sheet I want to call your attention to that talks about the why behind benchmarking and refreshing benchmarking. Questions that emerge, things like, I called and I asked if I could get the benchmark date extended, and that really mean person on the phone said no. The answer of why that really mean person said no is in there. What grade levels are tested? That's in the green sheet. Are we doing this online or on paper? Our goal is online. So there's a lot of information about the whys and the do's and the don'ts. And most importantly, my favorite part is on the back sheet, and it's the chart that talks about benchmarks and the role of the principal, the role of the teacher, and the role of the student. I think it's really important that we don't ever forget that role of the student in understanding their learning, where they are and where they're going. So just know that you've got that in the lime green, but you also have it linked within your agenda. So should that fall by the wayside by the time you get back to campus, it is linked in your agenda. So I am going to keep going here. Boy, we're fast. Oh, I guess we are done. And I am going to turn it over to our Linda. I think our Linda is our spokesperson around yet additional ways to support this work through regional team meetings.
Perfect timing, because I just stuck a granola bar in my mouth. I started eating it outside, by the way. I didn't start eating in here. We're not allowed to eat food in here. All right. So the work that you've done today in taking a look at benchmarks, or taking a look at the benchmark and diving into the data, is work we can do in isolation, is work we can do on paper, but it's work that's best done in action. So we're going to continue this work through regional team meetings and taking a look at what's actually happening in our classrooms, because it's one thing to take a look at the data and say, ooh, I don't think my teachers did a good job of teaching that, or wow, they really knocked the standard out of the park. But what does that really look like in action? So that teacher who really knocks the standards out of the park and gets the really good results, what are they doing? So we need to pick their brain by asking questions, but we also need to see them in action and a multiple amount of eyes watching them in action. So during our regional team meetings, we'll continue that work. We'll set it up. We'll take a look at what grade levels we are going to be observing when we're there. And then we're going to match what they're doing right back to the standards. What standards are they teaching? To what level are they teaching? Because that's one of the big ahas we've had so far is they're teaching the standards and they're making the connections, but at a very low level. So putting all of our brains together in our regional teams and taking a look at what ideas can we give that teacher or that principal when working with teachers on how we can raise the rigor of what's happening in the classroom, and other strategies on how can we target the learning. And, you know, what do we want our kids to learn is absolutely the most important question we're asking right now. So we'll continue the work in our regional teams, and there's a chart here that Andy's put up, and it's in the classroom as well, and you'll see the list of regional teams and the dates that will be at each school. These are the same exact dates we gave you at the beginning of the year. So we're not changing the dates, we're not changing the location. The difference is if you're hosting at that time, we want you to know that in addition to the people in our group, we're going to have some people from the teaching and learning from Andy's group that will be joining us, whether it be Don Foley, whether it be Jessica Veazey, whether it be Aaliyah Miller, but we're going to have additional experts come join us and help us look deeper into what's being taught in the classroom. So just, we want you to know that up front. And we will let you know ahead of time which additional expert will be joining us so that you can include them on the agendas that you send out and any communication that the host school sends out to the rest of the principals. And if you have specific questions for that person from Teaching and Learning who will be joining us, you'll know who that will be, and then you can come ready with questions for them as well. So, any questions on that? Please know this schedule has not changed. Andy and her group have taken a look at our current regional team schedule, and then they've plugged in the dates that they will join us based on schedules already set, okay? And I want you to think this is an additional time meeting, additional date I have to put in my calendar. If you plugged in regional at the beginning, they're the same exact dates, right, Holly? Same for high school, and same for East and West. Any questions on that? All right.
Yay, thanks, Arlinda. All right, next steps. We're at the end of the agenda. First of all, give yourselves a round of applause. Nice job today, guys. Some things that are coming, Benchmark 2, November 26th. Yes, it's coming again, right? Just like a boomerang. Here we are, November 26th, we'll start our benchmarks. The green sheet here, I like the green sheet. Green sheet is good. I would spend some time with the green sheet. I would ask yourself some questions about the green sheet. I would beg that you perhaps have some conversations with your teachers about the green sheet. The green sheet isn't going away, like I said earlier. January GAM, January 15th, we will continue this work on focus on learning and what do we want our kids to know. And we'll be using more data to dip our toe into the pool and walk alongside of it to make sure that we're focusing on learning and what we want our kids to know. Keiko?
The suggestion that I have for the benchmark refresh is based off of the article that you shared, and Patty and I were talking about how there's obviously a lot of emphasis on stakeholders, including like district and whatnot. This particular box up here on the back, the leaders, the teachers, the students, I would respectfully submit that there needs to be something related to how district level administration supports, because you guys are doing so much when it comes to training. I think about the, when I got math tingles. I can't ever remember a time that I did that, but working with Angela, and I think that needs to be on here because it also holds you guys accountable, but it also it honors your work too. So I just think that needs to be stated.
Let's give Keiko a round of applause. Nice job, Keiko. And I'll give you $1. Nice. Andy, did you want to say something? I know you did. Love it. Sounds good. Okay, so moving forward, January 15th, JAM, we're going to continue the work. Tomorrow, by the end of the day, you'll get an email from Amy Uchaz giving you the ability to see final Benchmark 1 performance from school to school. We are going to open the door, if you will, and share information. I think it's important that we know how we're doing as a district, and I think this is a good first step to start the conversations. The data is our data, and it's important that we have some strong conversations about the information. Did I mention I like the green sheet? Yes, I did. Oh, okay. If you're an instructional leader, can you raise your hand? Okay, your hand better be raised, right? Good job. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Conley.
Awesome. All right, awesome. I think my mic's on. Thank you. First of all, a big round of applause for our teaching and learning content specialists and departments. Yay, thank you. There's been a tremendous amount of preparation going into today as we go forth. I remember going to these meetings several times and then walking out where my one-page to-do list all of a sudden turned into my three-page to-do list after GAM meetings. But I want to give you just a couple more things around where we are as a district. First of all, preschool is at the front of all of our conversations. In order to change the trajectory for our children and have them ready for you as high school teams, we need to put the focus on early learning. We are looking at all sources of funding to be able to maximize early learning, rich literature, rich literacy, around our early guys. Okay, so that's that. On a federal forefront, there seems to be more money around career and tech ed. So know that as we look at career preparation, work studies, partnerships, as we have conversations in the district, that's what we're talking about. There is an enormous amount of opportunity sitting in Mesa. The economic development is getting ready to explode. As we meet with economic development directors, we have some outstanding opportunities starting in preschool all the way through 12th grade to work directly with our businesses. So it is also an opportunity as we look at funding woes to be able to have more funding go into our schools through business partnerships. So we're working really hard on that. Finally, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you because we all survived the summer. Today is the first day my heater came on in my house. And thank you for helping me get through my first summer back in Arizona. It has been a joy as I continue to learn so much from all of you. And of course, while we'll miss this guy, he'll be close by us.
Not going anywhere yet.
I know, we're going to have a party. By the way, big party coming up whenever that is. So thank you for, are you crying?
No, I'm shaking my head.
Okay. He does. Actually, I'm excited that we actually have math tingles. I haven't heard math tingles in a really long time. Woo! Math tingles from us former math teachers. Okay, enough of that. But again, thank you for all that you do each and every day. Thank you for changing the trajectory for our students. One more announcement, and I always believe of saving maybe the bad news or at least maybe not the happiest news for last. There's been a lot of questions around tomorrow and Thursday's professional development around the happy class. While I don't typically say it's mandated, here's what I do need. Because of the number of behavior concerns that we have with our students, I need at least one person from your building to be a train the trainer. Ideally, I would love to have you as principals, assistant principals, because I believe you as the leader needs to take a stand on helping us teach how to de-escalate behaviors. This is the best way I can describe this, is they have a recent book out called Happy Kids Don't Punch You, and it's built upon, I knew it, hopefully. It's built upon that premise. So again, it is important, train the trainer, taking it back to your staff, back to all of our staff. I do believe Dr. Lesser has a few more things that he'd like to share. So, no? Are you sure? Yep. Okay, wow. I know, I left him speechless.
Well, okay. Testing. All right. Yeah, all kidding aside, I really appreciate just wrapping it up here with you today. And, I come back to a couple of the articles that we had. You guys are the drivers of climate and culture on your campus. All the knowledge and standards, all the knowledge in the world won't do you any good unless you understand that you're the drivers of climate and culture on your campus. A climate and culture of learning and leading. And that's what we're tasked to do. And the great, difficult, challenging work that lies before us requires that kind of environment in climate and culture. And I would say one last thing. I've been around for a few years, as I had shared with you. There is a football coach who's no longer with us by the name of Jess Parker, and some of you know who that is. And one day he was asked, what is the most important responsibility that you have as a coach? And he said, the most important responsibility that I have is to help all of the athletes achieve at a level that they never dreamed possible. And that's our job as head coaches of our schools, to help our people to achieve at levels that they never dreamed possible. Climate and culture and the great learning and leading that you're doing right now. So thanks for being part of what we're doing today and your continued work in Mesa.